Good morning and welcome to Coffee with Mr. B. Hopefully this will be a short one today. I basically just wanted to build on some of the stuff that we have been doing with classical and Keynesian economics in my lower sixth classes and just talk about shifts in the SRAS curve. And then immediately after this, episode 28 will be talking about output gaps in classical economics as well. So the kind of two will fit together quite nicely. What I've got on the board up here already is the Keynesian diagram and the classical diagram. And of course, I have my cup of coffee. So if you want to go and grab your own cup of coffee, and then with me, we will do a synchronized sip, and that is going to be the best part of your day. So here we go. Oh yeah, look, very on brand today, as ever. Right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Gotta love coffee. So the Keynesian AS curve, let's just very quickly walk ourselves through that. It starts with I've drawn it quite horizontal today. Normally I'm better at making it a very slight incline. The reason that it looks like that then is because this area reflects an economy that is well within its PPF. There's a lot of spare capacity, so therefore as aggregate demand shifts to the right, it can easily satisfy that extra demand with the spare resources that it has available without any upwards pressure on price. Once we get towards full capacity then, as demand keeps on increasing, now there is scarcity of resources, and whenever there is scarcity of resources, that puts upwards pressure on the price level. So that's where you get the curvy bit going on. And then here at the vertical point of the AS curve then, that's an indication that you're at the PPF, and any increase in aggregate demand means that no extra output can be made. You are at YFE at that point, no extra output can be made. And the only outlet for that extra money in the circular flow is in the form of higher prices. In the classical diagram then, we simply have an upward sloping SRAS curve. That's a much simpler approach. It just basically says that if all supply curves in all the micro markets in a macro economy are upward sloping, then it follows that the total supply curve for all of the goods and services in the economy should be upward sloping as well. Fine. These are shifts in SRAS. Not LRAS. Okay, if I get time, I'll do another video on that for tomorrow. But basically, these are the four main shifts in our SRAS. And what you will see here is hopefully the same reasons that would shift the Keynesian diagram up or down. Okay, they're basically all costs of production. Let's go through them. So the first one is just what I would call commodity prices, or prices of things generally that are used in the production process of making lots of secondary goods. So I put here, e.g. oil, but equally we could have things like tin or steel or copper, any of those raw materials that are frequently used in the production of lots of goods and services in the economy. Now, it has to be a commodity that is used an awful lot in an economy. Otherwise, it wouldn't have an impact on the macro diagram. Remember, these supply curves here are meant to represent the entirety of the economy, not just one good or two goods, but the hundreds, if not thousands, millions of different types of goods or services that we produce in the economy. So it's no good thinking about a very rare commodity that's only used in the production process of one particular good, because that doesn't affect the production process of lots of things. This has to be something that affects the production process of, the cost of production for lots and lots of things in the economy. So for example, oil is used in the construction of plastic. Plastic is used to make a hell of a lot of things. Oil is also used in the transportation costs for lots of firms, or even for somewhere like Headington. Yeah, if oil costs go up, that means my petrol bill goes up, which means that next year I'm coming straight for the bursar to say, you need to pay me more money because it's costing me more money to arrive at Headington. So commodity prices for commodities that are used in lots and lots of industries in the economy. If they change, we should change the AS curve. So let's assume then that oil price is going down. I'm saying it's going down because if you're following the news, oil price is going down. Oil price is negative at the moment. That's really odd, isn't it? But let's assume we're working in a kind of normal, not anomalous time. Okay, let's just assume oil prices are going down rather than hitting negative. If, for example, then we were choosing a plastic firm, we would show that by showing the supply curve shifting to the right. We would do exactly the same thing in the short run AS curve. And if you remember what I was trying to say with the Keynesian diagram, that this basically is a construct of the short run AS curve and the long run AS curve, then we should do the same thing here, right? So that movement there is the same as that movement there, okay? If you notice, I haven't shifted LRAS at all. That's still the same. YFE is still at the same point. The PPF has not moved. The PPF doesn't move because of price changes. Okay, this is just a cost of production change. The quantity and the quality of raw materials has still stayed the same. So there is no reason to shift LRAS. We are just shifting the short run aggregate supply curve. Okay, wages. Well, we've done this because we did it through the classical model. The whole classical idea is based on this idea that wages go up or down to counterbalance any effect on AD. So to walk you through then the classical story, if demand or aggregate demand falls, demand for goods and services falls, demand for labor falls, and then wages fall. If wages fall, then the costs of production fall. Again, we have something like that going on in all the micro markets. And again, that's important because remember, this is a macro diagram, and therefore it shouldn't be just wages in one industry because that won't affect prices across the economy. But if wages throughout the economy are going down, then production costs throughout the economy are going down, and therefore we should feel confident to shift the SRAS curve to the right. And if you're shifting the SRAS curve to the right, you should shift this one downwards. Okay, so a rightward shift here is a downward shift here. That is how I see the two being linked. All right, they are the same thing. Those two movements are looking at the same thing. Exchange rate. So what I'm talking about here then is the appreciation and the depreciation of the exchange rate. If we talk about a depreciation of the exchange rate then as an example, okay, so I'm going to put in orange then, if the exchange rate goes down. So that means then the pound has got weaker. The pound can buy less of a different currency for its, because the value of the pound is less, yeah, £1 can buy now less of a different currency. That means then that the price of imports, P small m, has gone up. Now, why is this important? Well, the first thing to say is that this is very important for a country like the UK, where we import lots of raw materials, lots of commodities. It's not necessarily as important for other countries if they're not importing raw materials, or if in fact they're not importing very many things at all. If this was a country where there was no trade, for example, then this wouldn't make any difference. But for most countries it will, and for most countries it will because they import raw materials or they import just lots of manufactured goods or something else, okay? If you're importing lots of things, it will make a difference. And the reason is this. We have now just made those raw materials, those commodities, those manufactured goods that we're importing more expensive, okay? So if you are using Chinese components when you're building your, when you're making your furniture in the UK, if you are using Saudi oil when you are building your plastics in the UK, and those are now more expensive because of the depreciation in the UK exchange rate, then this will increase your costs of production. So we do an increase in the cost of production by shifting supply curves to the left in micro markets. But if this is something like exchange rates would that affects lots of industries in lots of parts of the UK, then we should reflect it on the macro diagram. In this case, we would shift SRAS to the left to reflect that costs of production are going up across the UK. And if we're doing it that way here, we should also reflect it there with an upward shift in the Keynesian AS curve. So a leftward shift in classical SRAS is the same as an upward shift in the Keynesian diagram. So this is actually a form potentially of cost push inflation. So if you've done exchange rates before, you'll know that one of the problems of having a weak exchange rate is the potential for cost push inflation. Or if you're yet to do exchange rates, that's going to be a good evaluation point of the problems with depreciating currencies. It's one of the problems that we've had since Brexit, when the pound has essentially collapsed in value, is we've had lots of cost push inflation from things like imported food, but also imported raw materials I was talking about earlier. Finally, then, indirect taxes. And I suppose the main indirect tax that I'm talking about here is VAT. It's not going to be a direct tax because direct taxes aren't taxes on costs of production. All right. We could put tariffs here if I felt that this was able to have a very wide effect in the economy and affect lots of different industries. But in the UK, we don't have a lot of tariffs as a result of being in the EU. Okay, and where we do, we only have them on very select products. So I'm not going to choose tariffs from a UK point of view. However, VAT is a sales tax, is an indirect tax that affects the price of everything pretty much in the UK. So if VAT was to go up, for example, if we push VAT upwards, then everything suddenly becomes more expensive. For a business that buys things in to then use to make other things, then it's become doubly more expensive, really, because the price of the things that they're buying in plus the selling price of their final thing has gone up as well. So VAT pushes the price up and the cost of production for all firms. I mean, again, another example to bear in mind is the Headington School at the moment is designated as a charity. So we don't pay VAT. When I buy your books in at school or the tables in the classroom or the pens that I write with, we didn't pay VAT on these because as a charity, we are exempt from paying VAT. However, let's say that now we have to pay VAT on them. Let's say we lose our charitable status. We would suddenly have to pay VAT on this. So you can imagine the prices going up for all of these things. Same detail. If the costs of production go up, then the short-run aggregate supply curve shifts to the left to indicate then that cost of production have gone up. When SRAS shifts to the left on the classical diagram, we should shift the Keynesian AS curve upwards to reflect the same thing. So there you go. Those are the four main reasons why the aggregate supply curve should change. I'm not saying this is an exhaustive list. I'm not saying there aren't other things. But the key thing to remember is it's a costs of production issue and not a quantity of quality issue. Save that for LRAS. Okay? Right. Thank you very much for joining me, and I will catch you next time.